for your testimony and for very concrete recommendations to the committee, to the White House, to State, and to Congress at large as to how we should proceed. I do hope your organization and you will look at our Vietnam Human Rights Act again, because we do have a very strong provision dealing with using our voice and vote at the Human Rights Council. And I think your point about marshaling other countries to join us, as again, Congressman Gao pointed out so well, this is the worst violator of human rights, and maybe there are others that are equal to, but in Southeast Asia. And again, the Human Rights Council has not distinguished itself as to membership. There are rogue nations that sit in good standing on it, and I think that brings nothing but dishonor to the process. And we need the Human Rights Council to be as faithful to promoting human rights, and who sits on it makes all the difference in the world. So, excellent point by you. Let me just ask, if I could, Ms. Zahn, if I could first begin with you. With regards to your sister, who is in hiding in Saigon, you mentioned, next week, I'll begin the process this week, but I'll ask to meet with the ambassador of Vietnam to specifically raise the issues raised by this panel, but to ask that your sister be protected, that the trafficker, as you pointed out, is in pursuit of her. She is in hiding, and a country that is a Tier 2 country, which Vietnam is, and that means that our government has suggested that they have taken action to meet the minimum standards prescribed in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It would be unconscionable for the government, once apprised of this situation, especially officially, to then look away and look askance and allow your sister to be further victimized. And I would say, you mentioned that the Russians on March 5th mounted a raid to rescue the victims, 14 of them at the time. However, 2 hours before the raid, a phone call from the Vietnamese embassy in Moscow tipped off Madame Thuan. She immediately moved the victims to another location. The Russian police only found an empty apartment. I recently we met, several of us, with the Russian ambassador to talk about adoptions and human trafficking. I will convey to him our gratitude that the Russian police did mount such an effort to liberate these Vietnamese women, and to ask that additional actions be taken to provide protection for them.
Will the gentleman yield?
You
know, I would first of all like to join you in that meeting.
Oh, good.
But also, I believe that Ms. Dang mentioned that there were 8 other women, and I think that we should pursue them as well.
Yes. Exactly. And that is what we'll do with the Russians as well as with the Vietnamese ambassador. Why is it that it's okay for a government to allow its women to be raped, exploited, and abused in a country? Where is the national interest that Vietnamese young women are being so cruelly exploited? They ought to be leaving no stone unturned to protect. But when, as you said, there are people from the embassy itself exploiting these women, that probably tells the story. So we will follow up on that with the ambassador, and I hope he sees clear to meet with myself and Ms. Bass and Mr. Meadows and others who might want to join us for that meeting. Let me ask you just a few other questions. If you want to respond, please do. But Mr. Tron, I should say, thank you again for your testimony and for reminding us of the ongoing cruelty that has been committed against the parishioners, and you yourself having suffered. So if you and perhaps others could speak to the UNHCR. You know, I have raised with High Commissioner Gutierrez on several occasions the unavailability of UNHCR personnel to assist Montagnard and others who seek protection and are given obstacles that are just insurmountable. Where's your passport? You know, they have a well-founded fear of persecution. They are being persecuted, and yet they are left adrift. I'm a great fan of the UNHCR. I think I've been to refugee camps all over the world. You know, they're good people, but they have not stepped up to the plate, in my opinion, to meet their obligations here. So if you could maybe speak to the UNHCR problem, and again, we will ask, this committee will ask that High Commissioner for Refugees Gutierrez appear before the committee. We have jurisdiction over the UN in this committee as well, and as we've done in the past, he will come in an official briefing because UN personnel are not allowed to testify in an official hearing, but frankly, it is a distinction without a difference. He will sit here and we will ask very courteous but very real questions of him. So if you could elaborate, if you will, on the UNHCR problems that you have encountered. Ms. Wood.
I'm not exactly sure why all these cases have been denied. I just have heard from other people, for example, that some of the officers are cutting people off during questioning. I know with the Montagnard situation, it may be a translation problem also. A lot of Montagnards don't speak fluent Vietnamese, which that could also be an issue. I've also heard from someone who works with Hmong National Development, for example, these victims will have scars on their bodies and they won't even get a chance to show the evidence of the torture, of the beatings, of their persecution. And also with the problem of the passports, this is after people have been in hiding for this recent case. I mean, it's been over a year. And then to finally go through the whole process, the whole time being in hiding, and then at the end of the line, they're saying, we need a passport, which they don't have, and then which they have to go get from the Vietnamese police. I mean, how do you ask people who are already in fear to then go get a passport from the Vietnamese police? So I'm not exactly sure what the right solution would be, but I just know right now the mechanisms in place are not working.
Yes, if I may, we have lawyers in Bangkok right now. We have legal teams in Bangkok to help about 900 Vietnamese asylum seekers. And there are some systemic issues. One is that the UNHCR doesn't allow any legal representation. So these asylum seekers go into the interview and they don't know how to articulate their claims. And they're not allowed to have anyone to come with them. And second, it looks like there's a policy of not allowing Montagnard and Hmong to be even registered for an interview with the UNHCR. So they don't want to see more Montagnard as an implicit policy. They don't see any more Hmong. And I would like to bring to your attention that at least right now there are 4 cases, 3 Montagnard and 1 Khmer Krom, who have been denied refugee status by the UNHCR. They have been told that they could return to Vietnam in safety, and they did return to Vietnam, and they were captured and tortured and imprisoned. And the UNHCR tried to go to Vietnam to visit them, but they were denied access. And 4 of them made it out of Vietnam, and they are now in Thailand.
Okay. If you could, Dr. Tong, provide additional information for the record, that would be very
Yes, thank you.
You know, and just let me point out to my colleagues and to our witnesses, we've had hearings on North Korea, and I've also met with High Commissioner Gutierrez on North Korean women who were trafficked into China once they made it across the border thinking they had escaped to relative freedom, and then were trafficked and sexually abused. The Chinese government sends them back sometimes, and when they send them back, they go to prison, they are tortured, some of them are executed, and we heard from witnesses tell firsthand knowledge of that happening. It is a gross violation of refoulement, of sending someone back when you have basic information that they will be so hurt. And China has signed the Refugee Convention. They're in violation of it, and the UNHCR and others have failed to take action. So, you know, the importance of these agencies is to take action when it is profoundly inconvenient, because they are all about protection, and that's what we will at least admonish the High Commissioner to do with regards to these individuals. Let me ask finally Mr. Tron, and then I'll go to some of the others after my colleagues. What has been the response of the U.S. Department of State, as well as the U.S. Trade Representative, to what has happened to your parish and the abuse that has been visited upon the parishioners, including yourself?
Dạ, tôi chưa nghe nói gì về cái sự can thiệp của Bộ Ngoại giao hay là chính phủ Mỹ về giáo xứ của chúng tôi.
No, I have not heard anything from the State Department or other agencies from the U.S. government about intervention and help for the parish.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Yes. Even when I was in the U.S. House, I brought up the issue directly with the Department of State and also through the U.S. Embassy in Vietnam. And I was received with somewhat of a lukewarm answer that they are looking into the problem, they are looking into the issue, but nothing was done. No utterances from the Department of State to condemn the actions of the Vietnamese government in the parish of Con Dao, along with the other locations as well as other religious groups that were being persecuted by the Vietnamese government. And this has traditionally been, I guess, the practice of the Department of State. To deal with these many issues with a blind eye, or simply to utter rhetoric without taking any action whatsoever. And in my own opinion, that if we continue to act in this way, then we are simply incomplicit with these despicable acts, because we are supporting a government to stay in power, a government that continues to persecute its people, a government that continues to torture religious leaders, a government that continues to make false arrests and to detain citizens without the due process of law. And again, I would urge you, Mr. Chairman, along with members of the subcommittee, to bring this very issue to the State Department, to ask them to take action, to ask them to sit down with us and other members of the community who are knowledgeable about the Vietnamese government, who are knowledgeable about the Vietnamese culture, to consult with us on how to dialogue with the Vietnamese government. That's all we ask.
Mr. Ai, if you could tell us, in your testimony you mentioned Ordinance 44, which authorizes detention of dissidents in labor camps and psychiatric prison. Is Ordinance 44 being used today?
Vietnam used Ordinance 24 along with other colorful ordinances. And again, because they do not abide by the rule of law, it is difficult for us to even comprehend what basis they are using to arrest dissidents as well as individuals who speak out against the government. And then if we were to look at their actions in Con Dao along with other parishes, even though when I spoke with the Department of State, with the U.S. Embassy in Vietnam, again, at that time it was Ambassador Michael Mihalik who was in Hanoi, his response was, oh, these are just simply land disputes. They are simply land disputes between individuals. And again, this is just a simple excuse for them to overlook the question, to overlook the problem, and to proceed on with possibly economic conversations or what you have between Vietnam and the U.S. government. Vietnam's intention in taking land from religious institutions, in taking land from religious communities, their intention is to suppress religious freedom. That is their intention. And these disputes are not simply property disputes between landowners or what have you.
Thank you. Mr. I, did you want to answer that, please?
Yes, I would like to talk something about the Ordinance 44. Many people forget that in Vietnam, there are not only the prison as such, but the Ordinance 44, all popular home, pagoda, church become a prison, like the case of Thích Quảng Độ. He is now in his own pagoda as a prison. And Ordinance 44 can arrest or send the people under house arrest for all the policemen in the town, in the countryside. They can do that, and they don't need with any due process law. And more than that, they can send people in the labor camp or psychiatric hospital. It's like under Soviet Union. It's horrible. And now there are 3 bloggers are arrested under the Ordinance 44 and sent to the psychiatric hospital psychiatric like Lê Anh Hùng, like Nguyễn Trung Lĩnh, or Bùi Minh Hằng, and so on. And especially the case of Thích Quảng Độ. Thích Quảng Độ do not be treated by before the process of law, and they hear that the policemen say that you are now under arrest, under house arrest, and since 10 years he is now in Thanh Minh Thể Viện as a prisoner, as under house arrest. So I think that many times we ask in the council in Geneva, Human Rights Council, to abolish and the Ordinance 44, but until now they didn't do anything for the Ordinance 44. So I would like to ask you to press Vietnam in order to abolish the Ordinance 44.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
When I did meet with the Venerable Thích Quảng Độ in his pagoda, I'll never forget how impressed I was, and I know others who have met with him, with his incredible peace and a sense of strength and resolve. But he told me that if he walked out the door with me, it would be a matter of seconds that security apparatus, personnel, and secret police would swarm and push him back and hit him right back into the pagoda. That's how ubiquitous this secret police is. Ms. Bass.